On Question Time India tonight, BJP spokesperson Prakash Javadekar, from the Congress Party Abhishek Singhvi, from the Communist Party of India Marxist Sitaram Yechuri, and historian Mushirul Hasan. Good evening and welcome to another series of Question Time India, where once again we have a high-powered political panel and an audience just waiting to ask them all sorts of questions. So let me start off by introducing our guests. We have the man who's the new face of the Bharatiya Janata Party, the party's new national spokesperson, Prakash Javadekar. Thank you for joining us on the program for the first time. Abhishek Singhvi, who's the spokesperson of the Congress Party, so the face of the Congress Party, the two major parties represented here, and Sitaram Yechuri, the face of the CPM. So there we have it, all three of you are here to take each other on. And we have with us to round up the panel our independent voice, one of the country's best known historians, contemporary analysts and political thinkers, Mushirul Hasan. Thank you all so much for joining us on the program. Let me start off with the very first question. Let's go to Bani Chopra, who's on the right hand side there.
I'd like to ask the panel that now that the Ayodhya issue is on the agenda, what do you think? Should there be a Hindu temple or a mosque built on the site?
So Javadekar, I'll give you a chance to answer that.
In Ayodhya issue, one must understand that it is the faith of the crores of people that it is the Ram Janmasthan, and on the birthplace of Rama we want a temple. There also today exists a temple built in 1992. So the temple exists, the prayers going on, the puja and everything is going on. Just now the question is to build it on a large scale, that's all.
So you're saying that the temple which is existing right now is not enough for you, you want a big grand temple?
It will be a big one.
Well, actually there was a temple which was functioning inside the Babri Masjid structure even before 1992.
Yeah.
Why then did
it is there right from 48. Yeah, immediately after the independence, there were idols were placed in there, and the worship and everything is going on continuously.
Well, I think as far as the stand is concerned, it's simple. The stand has to be either a court adjudicated settlement, or we'd be very happy if there's a negotiated settlement, but even a negotiated settlement would require a sanction of a court. One must not forget there are title suits pending, and therefore you need to have that sanction of the court even in negotiated settlement. But I want to just say one thing. Why is it that we find that even the beginnings of a negotiated settlement don't take place easily? It's partly because whenever there is the slightest possibility of an ambience being created, an ambience of give and take, you have these very provocative statements coming. We will not give up Kashi, we will not give up Mathura, we will do this, we will do that. So unless you allow a certain ambience to be created, even to talk of a negotiated settlement is hypocrisy.
For that reason alone, what Abhishek just said in the end, I think there is no other way except to have a verdict from the court. I mean, there cannot be any other settlement, and we'll all have to wait for that. And every time around, the effort is made to bring this back to the center stage in the run-up to some elections or the other. So the question is actually more than the temple.
So you're saying that a negotiated settlement isn't really possible, you have to go to the court?
The court is already seized of it, so let them give the verdict.
Do you agree with that?
I think, Vikram, the point is that nobody has yet been able to establish that a temple existed there. I think we have to wait for the excavations which are being conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India and for the court to judge on it. So that should be made very, very clear. We must recognize the fact that the mosque was destroyed, and I think no nation should be in the business of demolishing mosques or churches.
In what precise way would the excavations really help? Because let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that the excavations show that a temple did exist. Would it be your view then that the Muslim community should say that a temple existed there and therefore a temple should be rebuilt?
Well, I mean, if that is the view of the court, certainly on the basis of the evidence, if the court does arrive at that conclusion, then surely the Babri Masjid Action Committee must pay heed to the court's directive. But the important thing, I think, is not the kinds of controversies that have come up. The important thing is whether and for how long can we allow these symbolic issues to divide our society and to exacerbate tensions? I think time and time again these issues are exploited, they are raised, they are brought to the fore, not because there is any, the matter of faith is involved. I think they are brought to the fore because of high political stakes, and that is what I think the crux of the issue is.
Jawaharlal, is it all about politics? Is it all about trying to raise these issues to get political support?
No way.
I mean, after all, this was the issue that took the BJP from 2 seats to as many as you have.
That is also not true, but even today this is not a political issue or an election issue for us, because basically the matter is pending in the courts for last 50 years. The government has initiated now that there should be daily hearing, and so it is moving fast. But still there will be much time to be taken for the court verdict. And so we say that a negotiated settlement, as Singhvi ji has also said, that negotiated settlement is a way out. And when Shankaracharya and Muslim Personal Law Board, when they have failed in their first attempt, have both said that the window for discussion is open and they are ready for negotiated settlement.
Let's get the record straight. You see, this is not the first time negotiations have taken place.
Yeah.
The Shankaracharya himself was involved even
last year. Yeah.
And even before that, between 89 and 92, various the negotiations took place. So, and what was the result of those negotiations? The Babri Masjid was destroyed. So that's why when a lot of people have, say this, that let us wait for the court verdict, it's not without reason. And every time this issue is rigged up for a political motive, and it's not really a matter of faith.
All right, so some skepticism as to whether negotiations will ever work. The gentleman here in the blue shirt, very first row.
We are in the habit of worshipping the dead and condemning the life. When shall we learn? When should we think about the future rather than coaxing on to the past, as Mr. Historian had said, that we know that masjid was there, temple was there. Why not change it and live for the present and think for the future?
Very good.
I think that's an excellent point.
Very good, excellent.
And the audience seems to agree with me.
I don't agree, because everywhere in the world, even in Russia, even in China, even in the countries which are freer now, go back to their religion. It is going back to your root, and religion or deity or worshipping isn't harmful as yet.
I think the point that she was making was that instead of going on about this particular issue, surely there are other issues which should be
that is what the government is doing. So we have clarified umpteen times that in this formula also neither government was involved nor the political party involved, and we want as a party also that it should be non-governmental and non-political interfered solution should come.
I think the spirit of the question is reflected in the fact that if you examine every major election after 1992 till today, a few weeks, a few months before every major election, especially at the central level, including the state levels, this issue is sought to be raked up. And we know the party which rakes it up. That's the fact of the matter. You take the Himachal elections, you take the elections in Gujarat last year, a few months before each election this is raked up. Now,
so you are saying that the reason why we're talking about Ayodhya once again is because the general election...
Well, it is this dichotomy, this very strange dichotomy. You have this country looking forward, the 2000 new millennium, the IT country, the young youth dynamic country. We're talking about these things because it somehow is seen by certain parties as paying political dividends before the elections.
And no, this is the actual motivation. That's why I said it's got very little to do with faith. And therefore his question is actually the question which the real India is asking. You know, you look at the future. Why do you want to keep going back to the past? And please, one moment.
Yeah.
Your point that in all other countries is also wrong. Today you go to the Vatican. You can go to the cathedral there. They will show you the foundations of the pagan temple that was destroyed and the St. Peter's was erected. Now, if you go back into history, to where will you go back? Where will you end? And that is why, I mean, this is not only a dangerous ploy, but I don't think this has got any bearing on what India would be in the coming days, and therefore it is purely an electoral issue. Right. Being used for their electoral purposes.
Absolutely. I think, we must recognize the fact that every nation has a fractured memory. But the point is that somewhere along the line you have to bring about some degree of reconciliation in order to pursue this nation building project. And the point of invoking Babur, invoking Aurangzeb, invoking Prithviraj, I mean, this is, how long can we go on with this?
Okay, let me just try and see whether what the gentleman said is actually matched by other members of the audience. Let me get some more views. The gentleman here, yes, second row.
See, I want to clarify certain things, that in the new scenario after World War and World War II, we need a new thinking, so that we have to go against nuclear terrorism and work for the wildlife and environment in this world. And if we remove all mosque, all temples, all religion, which basically distorts the mind of people and blocks the vision, because all terrorism in the world is motivated because of religion. Nowhere in the history that suicidal attacks are carried out by killing innocent. When if we go beyond World War I, the aggression was there. The kings were attacking their neighbors, and even India was ruled by 526 kings when the Britishers invaded India. They gave a bureaucracy to India, and because of Britishers only, India was united. Now in this new scenario, why not we remove temple, remove Ayodhya, and whosoever is talking in favor of them, he should be arrested and sued for misguiding people.
That's a rather radical suggestion. Do away with all temples, do away with all mosques, and do away with religion completely. I'm not sure that any of you.
I think we have a new member in our party now.
I think what he's saying is really his party's creed. Religion is the opiate of the masses, and therefore they should be a religious society. I think it's just far too academic and ivory towerish opinion, because our secularism is
Sitaram's going to be contacting him with a membership form.
And our secularism and our definition of secularism in this country is Sarv Dharm Sambhav. Affirmative approach, have all religions in an affirmative sense, but not break down somebody's religion.
Together for centuries
It destroys the administrative structure.
No.
If we accommodate everybody, then we get no way. That's why we are poor. We have never faced any war. World War I, World War II. No war was faced.
I'll tell you.
Germany faced 2 wars, and he was totally destroyed. It was disintegrated, and all youth was killed. Even then, it is risen up to such a high level. We are nowhere.
Right, sir. Now let's get some. Let's just try and get some other views, and we'll come back to Mr. Javadekar. The lady there.
Yeah, I would just like to ask the panelists, why don't we leave all this to the local people who are staying there? Let them build a mosque and a temple side by side, because there are many examples in India where you find a mosque and a temple together, and people love and go and worship there and stay as brothers. So just let this thing be with the people, the local people, and let them decide as to what they want, and where should the mosque be made or where should the temple be made.
All right, fine. The gentleman, same row. Yes? Yeah, you.
So, according to my mind, I don't think the government has better things to do than to worry about things like Ayodhya, caste, sending troops to Iraq, whether to start a dialogue with Pakistan, whatever is politically expedient for them. Are not things like food scarcity, lack of shelter, clothing, electricity, water, corruption, don't they deserve more attention? Or are they too minor to ensure an electoral victory? I just want to ask this question to anyone who's remotely connected to politics.
The mood of the audience seems to be coming across rather strong. Let me see if somebody has a different view to what we're hearing. The gentleman there, right behind you, yes.
Yes, sir. The major thing today is that Ayodhya should be based on history, or it should be based on religion sentiment, or for the future, as the gentleman said.
All right, one more view, the lady there.
Don't you think it is sad that this Ayodhya issue is basically just an electoral issue? Are these the icons that the youth of today are going to look up to? Everybody is fighting for the kursi. Nobody is looking for the development of the country. I mean, in these
I'm getting the strength, this very strong feeling as to what this audience seems to be feeling. I just had to confirm that by taking a snap opinion poll from the audience here. How many of you feel that issues like Ayodhya are irrelevant right now and the government should think of other things? That's just about everyone in this audience. Which of you feels that issues like Ayodhya are important, they have something to do with faith and must be kept in mind? 2, 3, 4 people. Madam, why don't you tell us why you think it is important?
Talking to me. I think it's very important that people should be allowed to practice their religion and have a place of worship where they can go to the temple and sit there for a peaceful end. It is important to have a temple, and similarly mosque also, if they are religious people.
Okay, the gentleman right next to you.
So it's a basic reality. All the people here have been talking about let's not have the temple or the mosque. Fair enough. We must have progress in the country, we must have development, unemployment must be removed. schools and colleges should be opened. All that is there, but fact remains that you go to any part of India, there are people thronging a mosque, there are people rushing to a temple, they are rushing to the church. That is the basic reality. What is actually happening? There is a chronic stage in the Ayodhya affair and there is a acute stage. Elections are due. We are now passing through the acute stage.
Right.
Come the election, it will again subside, but this will carry on.
Right, but if I could now just come back to the panel, I think we've seen a very clear, at least this particular audience is made it very clear what they feel. Issues like Ayodhya, Mr. Javadekar,
yeah,
they say are not that important.
That is what I am saying, that this is not electoral issue.
It's not
and that is what we are. We never think of this issue as an electoral issue because the fight
excepting in 1989,
no,
1991.
Never. I'll tell you.
I mean,
I'll tell you.
Are you trying to say that in 1989 you didn't think it was an electoral issue?
See, the Ayodhya issue is there for last 500 years. The fight for Ayodhya temple is there for 500 years. There was no BJP, there was no independent India, there was no other parties, nothing of this sort. So don't consider this as a political issue. Basically, and the fight is on.
Is it just,
so
Mr. Javadekar, is it just a coincidence
what
that
government is doing is just facilitating to end this issue for once and for all.
Right,
that is the always the role of a welfare government.
Right. Mr. Javadekar, I think the point which Mr. Singhvi raised, and as the gentleman there said, that the acute phase of Ayodhya somehow always seems to surface just before election.
I don't know when there was any acute phase of Ayodhya before Gujarat election. No way. Before Himachal election, there was nothing. And so there was
what are you talking about? Before the elections in 2003 February and before the elections in 2002 February,
what happened?
Every time just a few weeks before, in tandem, the BJP, the VHP, the Bajrang Dal raised this. And I must correct Mr. Javadekar. Ayodhya may have been an issue in some kind of a legal dispute from independence, but the kind of divisiveness it has generated, it has not been there till the 1992 event was done. And we know how it was done, we know the people who were around when it was done. The kind of divisiveness generated is only from 1992. Our communities have not been polarized in that manner before 1992, even after independence.
Right.
So they can't escape the blame.
I mean, you see, you can prove this going by your statistically, you can prove this historically, that every time you require an electoral mobilization, Ayodhya comes into the center stage. Even Gujarat, you were mentioning, with the attack at Godhra, the car sevaks were coming from where?
So
they were coming from Ayodhya. I mean, please don't.
Was there attack?
No, please listen to me. The point is, the point. What I'm saying is that you have always. They are all Ayodhya linked. They are all Ayodhya linked.
Nothing to do with that.
I think the important thing is the response of this audience, and I suspect that it's not just the response of this audience, but I think there are many more people across the board who would perhaps respond in much the same strain and much the same refrain. The point that I'm trying to suggest is that I think these people reflect the popular mood of this country, and the mood is decidedly against all attempts to polarize this society along communal lines.
Having said that, I must add the caveat. This is, of course, relatively, probably, I would say, somewhat urban, somewhat middle class sort of audience. Is that the view? Is it your view that that would be also reflected in the villages?
It certainly is, and the point that somebody made, which is a very relevant point, that if you look at the local situation, if you go to the localities, then you would certainly find that people have evolved their own mechanisms for settling their disputes. It's only certain political parties who basically muddy the waters, who basically exploit local situations, and we've seen this in Madhya Pradesh. We're beginning to see it in Rajasthan. All this talk of distributing, these are all attempts to exploit the local situation.
I just want to get back to this lady's question, if you don't mind, for a minute. Yeah. You see, madam, I mean, all of us here, including me, I mean, even despite what Abhishek may say, I mean, being a Marxist, we will want to give freedom to everybody to practice their religion uninterferingly and without any coercion or without any suppression. Now that is the law of the land that we want to uphold. But at the same time, the right for one cannot be the right for the other to interfere on that and go around destroying mosques.
Right.
That is the point. That is the position that should be very clear.
I'll answer one question because many people have said that there are many issues, developmental issues, which are genuine. And I also think that there are many issues beyond Ayodhya. Why media and political parties are making hue and cry on Ayodhya, I don't realize, but basically...
I was wondering when you'd get around to blaming the media. It always happens. It never fails. It's always the media.
But basically developmental issues on developmental front, the Atalji government has done in 5 years, not only giving the stability to this country, but giving all types of connectivity and everything.
Right. Now that note, let me go to Aparna Banerjee, who's on the right hand side. She's a retired teacher, right hand side. Aparna.
What specifically is the government's stand on the proposal put forward by Shankaracharya of Kanchi? Is it catch-22 or try again?
See, this was not, as I have said earlier, this was not a government sponsored proposal. Shankaracharya is a great leader of Hindu society, Hindu religion. So he devised his own formula. He talked to Muslim Personal Law Board. There we had given only moral support that such type of dialogue between these two communities and leaders will bring out a negotiated settlement, and that is our stand right now also.
All right, I'll just come back to you, ma'am. Insofar as you were talking about that the possibility for negotiations must be kept open, unlike Sitaram, you're not saying that it should just be left to the courts. Do you think the Shankaracharya's overture initiative has any hope at all?
No, our formulation has been the negotiated settlement subject to court sanction, which is necessary.
Court sanction is
there. But I must add something here. As I said, the ideal situation would be negotiated settlement. But the way steps are taken to vitiate even the possibility of that are very regrettable. The Shankaracharya is a very revered person in our country. In the last few weeks we have seen the government makes a proposal, somebody perhaps bona fide steps in to fulfill that proposal or to act on that proposal. You then have in tandem indivisible arms and limbs of the government virtually abusing. I do not think, and it is ironical that those who speak in the name of Hinduism, I do not think we've seen the kind of abuses heaped on the Shankaracharya by bodies like the VHP and the Bajrang Dal as in the last 2 weeks. I think this is supreme irony. And you then have this great crisis of credibility because there is a growing feeling that these are all limbs of the same entity. They are parts of the same being, whether it's called the VHP, the BJP, or the RSS, or the Bajrang Dal. And you have these bodies attacking viciously. And 2 days later, the attack becomes muted. The third day, the attack starts again. Now, is this not A, playing with fire, B, playing politics, crash politics, C, creating a crisis of credibility on the remotest possibility of a settlement?
Right.
Yeah,
and who bears the blame for all this?
The settlement, I mean, I really have a problem, which I want even Abhishek to answer, even as a constitutional expert. You see, the point is the dispute here is what? Is it only a dispute between a temple and a mosque? Or is it also a larger dispute of what is the character of the Indian Republic? If it is a secular democratic republic of India, then I am also party to the dispute as much as the Shankaracharya is a party or an Imam is a party. Each one of us is a party because we want this country to be a secular democratic republic where such actions of destruction of mosques, etc. do not take place.
So that means that's another complication to any negotiation.
Yeah, I think there are two or three points very quickly. One is that there has been no transparency in this so-called discussions or parleys that have gone on. My second objection is that this business of drawing mullahs and pandits, and howsoever revered the Shankaracharya is, which of course he is, drawing them into politics and drawing them into these kinds of settlements, I think augurs not very well for the health of a secular democracy. My third point really is that why is it that whenever we have disputes of this kind, only the theologians and the men of religion are drawn into discussions? Where is the left opinion? Where is the liberal opinion? Where is this secular liberal opinion amongst Muslims or amongst other communities being represented? I think if we are talking in terms of strengthening a secular edifice, then surely the representation of other groups is as important as the representation of the men of religion. And I think we really need to assert sections in civil society need to assert their right to intervene in these matters.
Right. Let me go to Colonel Harish Behel now in the audience, a retired army officer.
So is it not true that BJP itself does not know what stand to take on Ayodhya, because two of its Parivar members, that is the Rashtriya Sevak Sangh and the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, are putting tremendous pressure on the leadership?
No, I don't think so, because BJP is very clear from the beginning. We say that there has to be a temple on the Ram Janmabhoomi, but that should come through a negotiated settlement or a court verdict or a law. There are only three ways which are there, and we have said it always from the beginning. So,
but I think the point which he is trying to make is that how much pressure is coming on the BJP behind,
no,
from the RSS, from the BHP. You're not hearing the talk of, you know, Mathura and Kashi surfacing once again.
See, the VHP is spearheading the agitation for Ram Janmabhoomi for so many years, and again they are serving a cause for Hindu society or Hindu unity in their own way. That is not building up a pressure on BJP government as such, and even on BJP. We have different opinions on many matters, and that.
What about Mathura Kashi? What's your?
Mathura Kashi, we have said it that it is not on BJP's agenda. Very clear.
Okay, fine. Let me just try and take one more question. This Mr. Tanveer Hassan, who's on the left hand side. Mr. Tanveer Hassan.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I know what is required in this dispute, and I know what the general public in India, who is suffering from unemployment, disease, illiteracy, they want. But since this has come to stay, I would like to ask the Hindu and Muslim leadership of India how they are going to resolve this controversy. Unfortunately, there is no member from the Muslim leadership on the panel.
Well, I think that's precisely Professor Hassan's point, that why should the Muslim leadership only be the theological leadership? But
I don't mean theological leadership. It could be political leadership. Any person
should say.
What are they? How are they going to resolve this controversy? It is there to stay. We can't wish it away.
Okay. One line from each of you then on how you think practically, if this thing has to be solved, how do you think it can actually be done?
You have to keep trying and solve it as early as possible, so there is other agenda where we have to concentrate and go ahead.
Okay. Well, given the number of warring groups, subgroups, parties, differences, I think practically speaking, without some kind of a court settlement, it will not be solved.
All right. My one sentence is always there: wait for the court verdict. Until then, concentrate on other things and don't use this for your electoral politics.
Well, my reference point is the Constitution, and obviously the court verdict fits in very well with the constitutional provisions. I think if we flout the injunctions of the Constitution, then we would obviously undermine the very basis of our secular society.
Right, but on that note, let's take a very quick break. In case you have some suggestions, some ideas on how you can solve the Ayodhya issue, perhaps you're the person the nation's been waiting for quite some time. Do send us your emails, your suggestions, your comments by email to qti@bbc.co.uk. We will, of course, feature them as often as possible. We'll take a very quick break at this point. We'll be back with a lot more in just a couple of minutes. Back to Question Time India. Let's move on to our next question, which comes from Anindo Banerjee from the right hand side up there.
My question is to Mr. Abhishek Singhvi. Now that the Congress is sounding happy with alliances, are we going to see the formation of secular alliances to take on the NDA?
Is that the plan?
Well, let me clarify. We've never really been unhappy with alliances. That's what you imply.
Of course you were. Panchmani, what was Panchmani all about?
Panchmani is no question of unhappiness with alliances. But in any case, moving ahead now, Panchmani was 5 years ago. In Srinagar, there's a very clear statement, and recently at Shimla, that statement has been reiterated. We are open, categorically and openly, to alliances, pre-poll, post-poll, but there is no blanket approach. It has to be on a considered basis. It has to be state specific. It has to take into account the situation as it emerges, and it depends very much on give and take. For example, to give you just one simple example, if somebody was to say have an alliance in some of the states coming up for elections in November, we would probably say where is the occasion or the cause for it. We might say something else for Rajasthan, we might say something else for Chhattisgarh. So these have to be considered, the details have to be worked out. But in
So
principle,
does that mean that you're not, is the Congress thinking or not thinking of setting up, like the NDA, a nationwide coalition which could take on the NDA? So in essence, you have then two fronts taking on each other in the next general election.
We certainly do intend to, and we would like to ensure that all non-communal forces, all forces opposed to the kind of government which the BJP has been giving us for the last few years, should unite. But naturally, the details have to be worked out. We would welcome it, we'd initiate it, we'd push for it.
Okay. Mr. Yechuri, there's an overture coming to you from your right in more ways than one right now.
Mr. Jyoti Basu has already said that he would support the Congress.
No, as far as we are concerned, I mean, their overtures are there, our struggle with them and fight with them is there, where we are strong, like in Bengal, Kerala, etc. But we have been very clear. We said what India requires today is actually relief from this sort of a combination, a communal combination as we call it, from ruling the country. So for that, we are willing to support any secular combination, and Congress being the single largest opposition party, we said yes, I mean, we'll be willing to support such a government as opposed to such a communal.
Now you're saying something very interesting here. Does that then raise the possibility that if you look at the next general election, you could actually have a situation where the Congress party and the CPM, for example, could go into the polls together as pre-poll allies?
No. No, I mean what we are saying is that we would like a situation where the BJP and the communal combination is defeated in the election, first. Second, if that is not possible in a situation, in the post-election situation, we would then extend our support to a secular government and a secular combination, and that combination I cannot foresee without Congress playing the leading role.
So you're saying that the Congress and the CPM would fight each other in states like Kerala and West Bengal,
they will come.
And immediately after the election you'd say actually we're together?
No, that's not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Even after that they will not say.
You see, the point is in Bengal, in Kerala and Tripura, we will continue to fight. And in the national level, the CPM would be wanting to actually, what we intend to do is to form a political alternative, a non-Congress political alternative. But in the interim, because that non-Congress political alternative would take some time to build, and the process is on, it will take some time. But in the interim, when you have elections that will come, there we are very clear, we would oppose the BJP-led communal combination.
Let me just say
does that frighten you?
There are definitions by Yechuri and his friends like him, that communal, whoever is not with them is communal, and whoever opposes them is communal. So Josh Fernandez is communal, Sharad Yadav is communal, and everybody, 23 parties, DMK is communal, everybody is communal.
Sir, let me correct you. Whoever joins you is communal.
Huh?
That is
no,
that is my
not
point.
way. You are saying BJP-led communal force. The government is not BJP government; it's a NDA government. Let us see it straight. We are just 182, and we are the support of 312. So it is half-half, and the half force is with us, which is all their secular credentials as certified by CPM also, and they are working with us, and they have no problem because they have no phobia. That is the real answer.
Mr. Jadhav, in the next election, supposing you had a situation where, for example, in a state like Uttar Pradesh, you had the Congress together with the Samajwadi Party taking you on, would that make your job far more difficult, getting a majority?
No, we are already there in the government with Mayawati.
So you think that's enough to you mean you'll continue to strengthen the NDA to take on this front?
Why not? Hathi mera sathi.
I think we have to realize that there are gradations and different species and kinds of coalitions. I mean, it could be pre-poll, it could be post-poll. There's no reason why in some states there may be some differences and electoral contests between his party and ours, but in the vast majority of states there's no reason why there can't be seat adjustments. It's wrong to suppose, and I can tell you, Mr. Javadkar need not be holier than thou. Certainly any coalition or adjustment between us here will have far more moral and other effect than any of the ones they are having. They have a walk-on, walk-off system. Mamta walks off someday, Ajit Singh comes on someday, they fight the Samta in some other state. I mean, where is he talking about any principles as far as electoral alliances are concerned?
The classic thing is in Tamil Nadu.
Tamil Nadu, both the parties,
both are supporting us.
And there is absolutely no method in the madness.
Let me just put it to you at a slightly larger theoretical level. Are we now seeing, there was a lot of talk, as Mr. Yechuri himself said, there's been lots of effort to try and put together a third front, an alternative to the BJP, the NDA and the Congress party. Do you think we're now seeing a drift towards a two-front sort of a system? in India?
Well, it's hard to tell, it's early days, but two things are, I think, very important in this context. One is that the ambiguity that one noticed in the Congress stand and coalitions has been removed after the conclave in Srinagar, which in a sense is the right message, is a good message for all the democratic and secular forces. The other, I think, important thing in the run-up to the next general election is the role, the trajectory of the gentlemen who were mentioned by the BJP spokesman, people like Mr. George Fernandez and Mr. Sharad Yadav and so on. I think their trajectory is going to be very important, and one would carefully follow them, because if they discover that the BJP's bandwagon is not rolling, that it is in fact sort of its appeal is diminishing in many areas, then I suspect that many of these players in the NDA would hitch their fortunes with some other formation. It could be the third party formation or any other formation, and that is the stage when the BJP would be in serious trouble.
Let me get some couple of comments from the audience. Gentleman here in the first row.
The party as rich in tradition as the Congress, why just look at an communal, non-communal alliance? Why move to real issues like health and education? I mean, if you form an alliance for that, I think in the long term and for all of us, that would be a far better goal. And I think you would find much more support through all sections rather than just alliancing yourself with a non-communal. Let's look at pro-development, real issues, bring that to the forefront. I think maybe it won't serve you well in the next 5 years or 10 years, but I think down the long run, I think people will support you.
You want politicians to think about something which is more than 10 years away? Being rather ambitious. The gentleman right behind you. Yes, you sir.
My point is, we have now seen both the governments, for longer time Congress than BJP. None of them has been able to solve the problems of the people. So we need that whosoever comes, but they should be able to solve our problem at large. As this is our suggestion that they should come.
All right, the gentleman in the blue shirt. Yeah, you sir.
I would like to ask one question. Just now Mr. Singhvi has said that Congress is open to alliance with everybody, but in the media it has been said that the alliance has to be under leadership of Sonia Gandhi. Now does it mean that anybody who refuses to accept Sonia Gandhi as a leader is a communal party, and those who accept her as a leader is a non-communal?
That's a good question.
Two things. May I just first spend half a minute on this gentleman's question, then one couldn't agree more, but as far as he's concerned, political alliances are a means of getting to an end. The end is the development you talk about. Just a few days ago in the recent Shimla meeting, we've had detailed, in-depth discussion on topics like people-oriented governance. We've discussed electoral reforms, we've discussed judicial reforms, agricultural reforms, rural transformation, social empowerment. The Congress, if I may say so, with all humility, has been the party repeatedly reiterating governance and good governance as the core of its agenda. So don't have any two views about it, and we are the ones who say that this is being misled by issues like Ayodhya and other things. As far as his question is concerned, I think it is perhaps too axiomatic even to require an answer. Do you really believe that we, the Congress party, headed by a Congress president, under whose leadership we have got 15 states now, who has united the Congress party as an all-India party, the largest single party in the country in the opposition, do you seriously think that we are going to propose a alliance or a coalition without her leadership?
Sitaram, is
May I
that
put
going to be a
another
problem?
question like that? There's no question about it. Anybody who alliances with us must accept, of course, we are the single largest party, and must accept the leadership of the person who's leader of the Congress.
You see,
that's an internal matter for us to decide.
You see, that is the point. We have always maintained that the question of who will be leader of which party is that party's business. Like they cannot dictate to us who should be our leader.
So you don't see that as a problem? You don't see it as a problem, the leadership of the...
No, I mean, I don't think that is the problem. The problem will not come now. And secondly, I think the Congress has also gone on record. I wish we had reiterated that the Prime Minister, whoever it be, is going to be elected after the elections by the people who have been elected.
No? But they've made it pretty clear that it will be Sonia Gandhi will be the Prime Ministerial face.
Each party has the right to choose its own leader.
Right. See, there are very... from Shimla, they have come out with a call for coalition. And by the same call, there is trouble brewing in Maharashtra, because they want coalition to take place under the leadership of Sonia Gandhi. One should accept those who want to join this coalition should accept her as a Prime Minister. That is the point of difference between NCP and Congress. They are rightly in the government right now, and so they are giving coalition call but breaking in Maharashtra. That is the problem.
All right. Well, obviously you should know that far from being in trouble, we've had a government going perfectly well for more than 3 to 4 years in Maharashtra, much to the chagrin of the BJP and its partner the Shiv Sena, who remain ousted.
All right, let's
move on now. Can I just get back to his question for half a minute?
Okay.
You see, the question why you seem to be saying that why are we obsessed with communal, non-communal? You see, the whole question is, unless you remove this virus from governance, you cannot get back to the people's issues. All that you're doing, which team will play cricket in Bombay, who will sing ghazals, which film will you see, which mosque will remain, is that the agenda for the country?
All right, fine.
No, unless you remove them from power, you cannot get back to the real issues.
Your 15 seconds are up. Okay, next. Let's go to Joydeep Bhattacharya now, who's on the left-hand side. Joydeep?
Last week on Question Times, Pak PM Mr. Jalani said that India should prefer to talk to the civilian PM of Pakistan. So my question is, who should India talk to, President Musharraf or Mr. Jalani?
All right, and we've got a lot of email responses also after that episode of Question Time Pakistan with Mr. Jamali. Uday Kumar, for example, writes in from Cochin in India, who says, I just saw your program this evening with the Honorable Prime Minister of Pakistan, who appeared to be a suave and matured person in comparison with the country's hawkish and upstart of a president. That is, piece is what he wrote, judging that the elected leaders of both India and Pakistan are friendly and comfortable dealing with each other. Delegations are moving in and out of both the countries despite the unresolved Kashmir issue. I am zapped as to where exactly lies the problem between India and Pakistan.
See, the position is very clear. There is no timetable set, or no question comes of talking directly with A or B, because till Pakistan shows it very clearly that they have stopped helping cross-border terrorism, and that's the national consensus, and that is why there is no timetable set right now. But whenever the question of talking with somebody comes up, it is a protocol matter. It doesn't chooses a person.
So you don't have a preference for Prime Minister Jamali over President Musharraf?
No,
or the other way around?
I don't think so.
Well, I think 2 points I want to make here. I don't think internationally, domestically or otherwise in governance, country A can ever stipulate that they will talk only to X, Y, Z of country B. I just don't think it's done constitutionally or otherwise. But having said that, I must add a realistic dimension to it. I think we all understand who's the boss over there. We all understand who calls the shots there. We all understand that no settlement can be really final, whether we do it with Jamali or A or B, unless that boss, the commander-in-chief there, agrees to it. So at some point of time, this issue would have to be addressed. But certainly for starting talks, I don't think country A can ever stipulate that we will not meet unless we have Mr. B on the other side.
Right. You go along with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we can stipulate who will, but the other issue I want to take up is that yes, we have offered the talks, we have taken the initiative.
Yeah.
Now, when we took that initiative, the cross-border terrorism issue was there live. Yes. It is live even today. Now, by putting a condition that you stop that cross-border terrorism, only then I shall talk, is actually cutting the branch on which you are sitting. I mean, what exactly is the government trying to get at? Now, that is the point we all want to know, because it's a dangerous situation. Pakistan claims, supposing that it has stopped cross-border terrorism. We know that it has not stopped. So what is the solution? You have a third-party interference to check whether they have actually stopped or not. And willy-nilly, this government is actually allowing that situation to arise. So I think there's a total, complete lack of clarity on how you want to go ahead, unless they want to use this also for electoral purposes.
I'll come back to Mr. Jadekar, but I'll just have to get...
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is that in the past we've also talked to generals. I mean, we've talked to Yahya Khan, we've talked to many others. So that really is not the issue.
Is there a problem of trust now when it comes to General Musharraf? For some reason, General Musharraf seems to raise the hackles of a lot of people.
Well, I suspect that he's no more or no less trustworthy than his predecessors. But I think, as Sitaram was quite rightly saying, that since the process has been initiated by us, we must continue to talk and talk. I don't think we should find excuses for postponing talks, and I don't think we should raise fresh issues which would in any way sort of hamper this process.
But going on talking about cross-border terrorism, let's face it, cross-border terrorism isn't likely to end overnight. Maybe there's a certain view which says that as you have the talks are successful, cross-border terrorism will also start ratcheting down.
See, I think the single most achievement of Atalji's government is that we could really tell the world that this is what Pakistan is doing, and your fight against terrorism after 9/11 is our fight for last 9 or 11 years, and we are suffering for that. Thousands have laid lives, and so he has internalized in a way the issue and convinced India's stand on this. Okay, that's an achievement.
Let me just quickly try and come to some members of the audience whom I haven't come to yet. The gentleman there, yes, in the t-shirt, yes.
So don't you think it's the right time to attack Pakistan? Just like you have done to Iraq. I think it's the right time to attack Pakistan and finish them off.
Election time coming up?
We somehow come back to that same topic every time. Gentleman there, very last row.
Yeah, I also have the same thing to say, and we have enough of talks. I think it's high time to give them a good rap and close the issue once for all. And prepare to face the consequences also.
Some slightly different views. The lady there in the last row.
I think the problem is that the common people are never allowed to talk. Whether it is Ayodhya, whether it is Pakistan, if the ordinary common people were allowed to talk, there wouldn't be these problems. The fact is that it's always the politicians who are talking, and they don't give a damn about what the common people want.
There could be I have a suggestion. Actually, there can be, and in many countries it is there, a system of referendum on small issues. That doesn't destabilize or make difference to the government. But on certain issues, people's voice is heard and they feel participated in that.
I mean, do you want to have a referendum on this suggestion that politicians are kept out of the talks and we give it to the people?
No, she is saying that they should be also heard on many issues.
She actually wants to be leading the talks, not you, or not the government.
No, not way. She is saying that she should be heard. People should be heard on many issues. That is what she is referring.
Right. Well, I don't know about referendums on that issue, but do keep your suggestions, your comments on the India-Pakistan issue and all other issues also coming in. Let's remind you one more time that our email is qti@bbc.co.uk, and do send your emails to us. We'll take another break now. We'll be back in just a short while. I think we have just enough time for one more question. Let's go across to Piyush, who's sitting there.
My question to the panel is regarding their opinion on CAS. Does the panel know what CAS is? Is it Confusion Access System?
Good definition. Good definition, but only one thing I can assure is that what Prime Minister has asked I&B Minister to ensure that consumer should not pay more than what he is paying today. Actually, it should come down. And what has been announced that from 1st August, it will be 75 rupees till the conditional access system really works on. And so, those intervening months enjoy in 75 rupees all the pay channels free.
Do you have any?
I don't think we have enough time to discuss this rather vexed issue, and I've looked into the details. But it is certainly, it might not be too bad in conception, but it is certainly completely flawed in delivery. And I think the problem is that you've converted, that's not a priority item in this country. At the moment, I don't see why it is such a priority that you've converted one ministry called the I&B ministry into a CAS ministry for the last several weeks and months. I don't think the time has come, and if the time has come or is about to come, then you aren't prepared enough for it. You needed a very in-depth survey, preparation, availability before you even started talking about the idea.
And I think, I would tend to agree with Abhishek, but I think there's some other motivation behind this. I mean, which ought to be told to the people. Because why start it with the metros? Why start it in such a haphazard manner? Why start it when you don't have these sets that are available? I mean, all this shows that there's some other motivation. And that this government has perfected so far. I mean, there are lots of other
things. We go into this in greater depth in perhaps some subsequent editions of Question Time India.
There is another issue involved in this, which is the issue of division of labor. I'm sorry, this may sound irrelevant, but I think it's very important from my way of understanding this, that parliamentarians are not able to solve the problems of the nation, so the courts intervene. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting is not able to solve this problem or the disputes or the various claims and counterclaims, so the Prime Minister's office intervenes. Now, this seems to me to make absolute mockery of democracy. I mean, it does, because if a particular ministry that is assigned with this responsibility is not able to sort out the problems, then, I mean, the railway ministry is obviously there are a whole lot of accidents that have taken place over the last few months, and then if the railway ministry decides to pass on the buck to somebody else, to the Prime Minister's office.
The whole cash issue basically started with the consumers demanding through their forums on this issue, because the cable operators or the broadcasters ultimately were exploiting the consumers and charging higher and higher fees. From 70 rupees, now we have come to 300 rupees and certain cities 400 rupees.
All right, fine. There's clearly lots more to talk about cash. We'll try and have the Information and Broadcasting Minister in perhaps the next episode, or maybe the episode after that of Question Time India. If you have any questions to put to him, do send them to us to qti@bbc.co.uk. I'm afraid we are completely out of time now for this particular edition of Question Time India. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and the audience as well. Do join us again next week, same time, same place here on BBC.